Well, it's been a really boring, quiet year in Canadian manufacturing, right? Just nothing's happened. Oh, no, I'm just in. Oh, yes, tariffs. Right. Well, before we dive into that, why don't each of you just give us a quick, what is your company, what does it do, and a breakdown of your US, Canada, and global markets.
Start with myself?
Yeah, let's start with you.
Yeah, so Linamar is about a 60-year-old company. It was founded in Guelph, Ontario, Canada. 34,000 teammates. We're in the mobility sector, we're in the ag sector, we're in the construction sector, and about $10 billion in revenue.
Okay, and the breakdown between US, Canada, and...
I would say the majority, probably about 70% would be Canadian, would be our breakdown, and then we would have about 10-15% US based.
Gotcha. Okay, how about you, Paul?
Hi, Paul Soubry from NFI Group, headquartered in Winnipeg. We are North America's largest bus and coach manufacturer, so we're serving both public customers and private operators. We've got about 9,500 people. We do close to $4 billion US in revenue, and about 75% of our revenue is in the United States, and then about 10 in Canada and 15 globally.
All right, and Rob?
So Martinrea, first day was September 10, 2001. So we had an interesting second day. We've grown from about 0 to 5 billion Canadian in sales. We have about 85% of our sales in North America. To give you a sense of the split, about 2,000 people in Canada, about 4,000 in the United States, and over 8,000 in Mexico. So we're very much North American oriented, but operations in Europe. We're mainly an auto parts manufacturer. We do lightweight structures and propulsion systems, steel, aluminum, fuel and brake lines, and so forth. And very glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, as you can hear, there's a definite integration between Canada and the US with manufacturing. And of course, with the advent of Trump's tariffs, this has been quite the interesting and challenging year. But we also have a little something that you guys probably call CUSMA, but we call the USMCA here in the US. And so how has that framework affected your businesses? Jim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's been a challenge, and the challenge changes like almost every single day, every week. Again, like from a Linamar perspective, we've sort of come at this, I guess the way we've been saying it is this time has been a business person's nightmare, but an entrepreneur's dream in some ways, and you need to be able to pivot, be flexible, and really adjust as you go. But again, we probably learned way more about HS codes in the last 6 months than anybody would ever want to even think about. And again, how we adjust to each one of these has been something we work as a team. And really, the latest derivative tariffs have had a real deeper impact on the complexity of what we're producing and selling. And it gets a little bit more complicated because now you're down to melt pour weights and trying to adjust to pig iron, cast iron, and it's just very, very complicated. So again, it's a day-to-day issue to monitor.
Right, so the sectoral tariffs have had quite an effect. But when you're moving parts around under USMCA, how does that sort of give you an advantage? Yeah,
I think again, one of the key things, as I said, it's like an entrepreneur's dream. And if you look at the mobility sector, onshoring is a big topic. Actually, I was mentioning to somebody yesterday, and Rob knows this. We have a sales program we created called MAGA, right? And that's Make Canada, Mexico, America Great Again sales program. And that is basically onshoring, because I do believe that all three of these nations have to get it together and will get it together. There is no other formula long term, I think, for our North American side. So I think we have a lot of negotiation tactics going on, but I think at the end of the day, we need to get unified as a North American group.
Gotcha. And Paul, it sounds like you have quite the exposure to the U.S. So tell me about what things have been like.
The vast majority of the business is public funds, so federal funds or state and local funds. And so inherent on using the federal funds, there's a Buy America element. So our supply chain has always been primarily U.S. oriented, whether we're building for a U.S. customer or a Canadian customer. And as Jim mentioned, the dynamic now of having to know 2, 3, 4 levels down in the supply chain of what makes up those parts that we buy. The other uniqueness or challenge is from when we bid to when we build can be 12 to 18 months. And so you kind of got a little bit of handcuffs on in terms of the ability to resource, given the Buy America dynamic. The other unique part of our world is the vast majority of elements that go on a bus are spec'd by the customer. So when the customer says use Bob's seats or Fred's windows, our ability to pivot there is very difficult. Having said that, what we've tried to do is work integrated with that supply chain dynamic, but we're expanding the Canadian capabilities. So what we'll do is source where we source. We'll build in Canada for Canada. We'll build in the U.S. for the U.S. So it costs capital to do so, but we think for the long term we'll be far more insulated from any of these incredible shocks that go up and down.
Sounds good. And Rob, how have you seen demand change over the past year ever since the tariffs were announced?
Well, demand's been pretty good, but let me tell you where I think we're going to get to on USMCA and why I'm optimistic about it. And so there's 5 aspects to it. The first one is we've got to work to a place where there's no tariffs on parts or cars in North America. It's kind of silly in the context of that, and I think we'll get there. I think Canada and Mexico have some trading chips that they can do to get there. The fact is that an assembled vehicle in Canada has over 50% U.S. parts, and it's similar in Mexico. So we are different than Japan and Korea and so forth. The second thing, the U.S. has pushed for higher rules of origin. I think they're right. I think every supplier thinks they're right. And the OEMs don't always agree with us, but the OEMs at the end of the day will do anything for a cheap price, including import from China. And I think the U.S., that's a bugaboo, and I think they're right. The third thing is there has to be a higher penalty for not complying with rules of origin. Right now it's 2.5%. If it's 25%, those rules of origin have teeth, and so I support that too. The fourth thing is I do think you need to have tariffs or quotas or something on what comes from Europe, Japan, and Korea, because at the end of the day, that will encourage them to make more here. Just to give you a sense, we sell 19 to 20 million vehicles in North America every year, about 16 in the U.S., close to 2 in Canada. We buy a lot of cars in Canada, a lot of trucks, 1 to 1.5 in Mexico. We only make 15 million. That's 4.5 million. So if you could get another 2 million built by European, Japanese, and Korean suppliers here, that's 10 assembly plants. That's huge, huge production. That's exactly what the U.S. wants, rather than taking 50,000 vehicles from Canada, trying to get 2 million from Europe. And then the fifth thing is you got to keep China out because they cheat. And so at the end of the day, that means their parts, that means their cars, that means their investment, because in our industry, and the USMCA is primarily an auto pact, and a lot of people are jumping on it, you have to, in essence, recognize that Chinese investment is displacement. We've seen it in furniture, we've seen it everywhere else. So I've been arguing this for a number of years. 3-4 years ago, I looked like a Martian. But that is U.S. policy. That is Lighthouse's policy. We're seeing it in Mexico. We're seeing it in Canada. If we do that, I think we're going to get there. And the other thing that was talked about, there are a number of things that Canada can do and Mexico can do to effectively create a better relationship. It's not just about tariffs and trade.
Right. And of course, Mark Carney is in the White House today, and we're, thinking about whether or not USMCA will be renegotiated and how. 2026 is sort of that deadline. When you're looking forward, Rob, to the next year ahead, how are you modeling for a potential time when perhaps USMCA changes?
Well, I think it's going to be renewed. The messaging I'm getting is the White House isn't saying they're going to tear it up. It was very interesting. I was in the White House the week after the tariffs were announced on auto talking with Kevin Hassett. He's a very smart guy, doesn't know anything about manufacturing though. And I said, do you realize that if you put tariffs on parts on February 1, the industry would be shut down by February 3rd? I mean, we could do it ourselves. No, why is that? So anyway, that was the discussion then. Then when Carney visited the White House back in May, a number of Canadian CEOs, and I'm not a CEO, I'm executive chair, my American partner's the CEO, we had a good discussion with Besant, and I went over this 5-point plan with him. He said, I agree. And he says, we've come to the conclusion that tariffs on parts are a really bad thing. And I think that's true. And you can look at that. It's not just automotive and transportation, but we have to essentially go look at the facts, negotiate, and so forth. And I think we're going to be fine. The other thing I would say is Mexico has come a long way. They have had they've been playing the fence a little bit on China for a long time. And in the last month, they announced that they were aligning with the United States on China, which I think is extremely important.
Okay.
A good example of what Rob just described, and on a parts basis, a camshaft forging we buy out of Mexico. We ship that into the U.S., which gets processed. It comes to Canada, that gets processed further, goes back into the U.S., gets finished processed, and then that goes into a transmission plant in three different countries. So when you think about this cross-border, calculation of parts crossing back and forth, it is like an omelet. You cannot scramble this thing, right? Like, it just doesn't apply, right? So to me, I think Rob's dead right on this. You got to have the free trade on the parts, because it just doesn't work.
Yeah, we make things together.
Yeah,
that's just the way it is. And the benefit of that is the consumer, including American consumers, all of them are voters, get better vehicles at better prices.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. And Paul, Rob had quite a list of things that are important to him to see over the next little while. When you're thinking about revitalizing Canadian manufacturing, what are some of your policy recommendations?
Well, in our business, the vast majority is Buy America driven, right? Which requires two things. One is final assembly in the United States, and the other is U.S. content. So USMCA has been fundamental to us in terms of being able to move stuff back and forth. And I do agree with Rob and Jim that has to be critical going forward, that ability. But our world is not like what Jim described of stuff going back multiple times. We buy something, we embed it, we may send a vehicle to US or into Canada. The stability around tariffs, in our case, the vast majority of our customers are public customers. So in reality, the government tariff is paid for by the taxpayer, which is, just effectively an inflation on themselves. And so the reality of being able to work, to be able to pass that on, but also to educate people around the ultimate cost is going up, just like in a retail sector where the customer is actually paying the tariff. So stability around tariffs, whatever they end up being, is critical going forward, whether it's tariff between Canada and the United States, or many components that we buy in the U.S. have international components or elements to them that come into the U.S. Stability around that would be fundamental to competitiveness on both sides of the border going forward.
Gotcha. And have you ever encountered, I know you say that you are, you're doing the final assembly in the U.S., and so is there anyone that says, hey, wait a minute, you're a Canadian company? Like, does that ever come up?
No, we don't have that, because we have twice as many people in the United States that we do in Canada. And at the end of the day, the sourcing of the material is U.S. origin, and the people are. There's once in a while you'll find somebody that, from a procurement perspective, that say that's a Canadian company, but we bid as a U.S. customer, as a U.S. supplier in those environments. And at the end of the day, the bad news around the whole hyperinflation dynamic and COVID and supply chain dynamics is many of our competitors are gone. So quite frankly, today I only have one competitor in the U.S. and one in Canada. So the table has turned in terms of who has leverage in terms of purchasing, sourcing, building, and assembling for a customer.
Right, and I mean, buses will still be necessary.
Well, the good thing about us is, unlike many other things in our world, buses are not going away. A city bus may change size and shape and color and propulsion system and whatever, but buses are not replaceable. They are the backbone of every city in North America, in the world for that matter. And intercity coaches are not going away. They'll change in those elements. You can't replace them. I mean, anybody that lives in Toronto or any other city that watches to try and extend a subway system or put in light rail is $10 kajillion over 20 years, and then it's over budget and overextended. You can dynamically change a part of a city with public transit, with buses tomorrow. So it's quite a really exciting place to be.
Fair enough. Jim, how are you seeing Canadian demand versus U.S. demand for your products?
In the industrial side, we're probably in a down cycle on both the construction and the ag sector. It's hard to understand if that's related to the tariffs. I'm sure it has some impact. That would be one of my key worries about, eventually this tariff is going to have to hit some demand level. But the mobility, as Rob said, has been pretty stable. And I think that's good in regards to, manufacturing our perspective on that is, it's important to note that we don't look at Canadian manufacturing as a place that is struggling. Actually, quite frankly, our operations in Canada are probably one of the best running, efficient plants that we have on all the metrics, contribution, uptime, mean time to repair, you name them. There is a lot of great synergies that are there today. But eventually, I think, for all of us in Canada, we are under some siege of the manufacturing sector, and I think we got to create some partnerships, be like Martinrea, and obviously all of us here need to find partnerships be big brother or big sister for some of these smaller companies that they can succeed, create relationships with universities, and get the government really, and we were at the Stephen Harper last night, and he highlighted some of this, really reducing the regulatory issues in Canada to make us ability to move way faster, provide the incentives for innovation, and really to get a workforce team that we can develop for the future.
Okay. And Rob, in terms of markets other than North America, what are your thoughts on potentially diversifying outside?
Well, we've been very careful about China. I'm a bit of a student of geopolitics, and I said we put too much in China. It's going to blow up in my lifetime. It's doing that now to a certain extent. I think Europe is a museum for history. There's opportunity, but at the end of the day, I think there's huge fidelity in North America. And I do think that the United States is blessed with the 4 best neighbors in the world: the Atlantic and the Pacific, Canada to the north, Mexico to the south. We do things extremely well in Canada, very talented. You take a look at the auto parts industry, 3 of the fastest growing auto parts companies in the world have come from Canada: Linamar, Magna, and ourselves. We've grown from about $15 billion in sales in 2001 to about 75 today. We've done a lot of, I've bought a lot of bankrupt U.S. companies in the context of that, and we do things really well. The thing that I would say in terms of the whole reshoring and manufacturing, U.S. doesn't have enough people, folks. They just don't. And so at the end of the day, you need to take the resources of Mexico and Canada in order to do some of this stuff. That is just a reality. It is very hard to open up a plant. We have operating plants from Michigan down to Alabama. We know how to run plants. We're the first or second largest employer in every community that we're at, because we tend to be in more rural communities. And at the end of the day, we are a solution to the United States. The one other thing I'd say is that there's a lot of talk. Canadians and Mexicans are upset with some of the rhetoric that comes from the United States. But a lot of the criticisms that have been placed on Canada, and we saw it with the first speaker, are absolutely correct. Our border used to be the envy of the world, and we blew it, right? We opened up our border. We've got to fix that. We're soft on crime. I have 2 brothers that are retired cops. They've been telling me this for about 30 years. We have not protected our Arctic. It's our Arctic. We will protect it. We don't need the United States to protect it. That's why we're spending the money. We have to spend more on military. We have to unleash our energy and get rid of our interprovincial trade barriers. And I think I really do believe that the 21st century belongs to North America, but it also belongs to Canada. We have more natural resources per capita. We're the richest country in the world per capita in the world, other than some small Arab states that have a lot of oil.
Okay, bullish on Canada. Paul, what do you think about international expansion?
So our product, what we deliver, design and deliver, is very unique in each of those countries or regions. And some of it has to do with Department of Transport regulations or safety regulations, as well as climate. So the ability to build a bus in Winnipeg and ship it to Singapore is not going to happen. So what we've decided to do is focus largely on Canada and the U.S., and we have selectively acquired outside North America. So we bought the world's largest double-deck maker based in Scotland and England, with facilities in Singapore and Hong Kong. And we do use some Chinese build partners. So we'll design, source, and have somebody build it to ship to that region. But shipping globally from where we live doesn't make any sense. The other offset of that, which is quite interesting for us, is we live in this little bubble in North America around certain levels of technology. By playing internationally, we're learning about competitive strategies and dynamics, the Daimlers, the Volvos, the MANs, and so forth. And so we're able to be the beneficiary of know-how, technologies, and so forth that we can actually bring to Canada and the United States and deploy. And so part of our dynamic is the propulsion shift from diesel, natural gas, battery, hybrid electric, to battery electric and now fuel cell. And it's not a light switch. It's a progression, and every situation, every politic, every geography has different dynamics. So we made two decisions. We would offer product that had any propulsion system, so the same envelope. So in New York City here, we have diesel, we have natural gas, we have hybrid electric, we have battery and and fuel cell, all in the same envelope. And so there was that. The other issue is we build them all in the same production line. So by definition, you have volatility of labor and material and working capital inefficiencies, but you have infinite flexibility to build based on what the customers. And we sit here today with something like a $15 billion backlog, so almost a 3 or 4 year backlog sitting. So we're at a pretty unique place in that environment, notwithstanding the turbulence of tariffs and USMCA today.
Okay, some hope. And Jim, it seems that Linamar has sort of been a surprise winner from the tariffs. There's the USMCA has really helped your business in some ways. Is that fair to say? Tell me about that.
I would say that we've held our own with it. I wouldn't say we benefited from the actual tariffs. I think it's been very difficult, a challenge for our employees. It's been a challenge. It does cost us, of course. Again, we from our strategy, we're not going to do anything that we regret, meaning we're not going to shut down plants, move plants around, and all those type of things. We are very focused region for region. We've always had that strategy. You produce in the region that you're selling to your customers in that region. The advantage to us, I think we have a good balance sheet today, and there is a enormous amount of distressed industry going on globally, and it's different per region, but there's a lot of difficult situations going on in Europe that we can assist our customers with, so we will definitely keep focused on that.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we have about a minute left, so I'm going to ask each of you, if you were in the White House today hanging out with Mark and Dawn, what would be your message?
I've spent time with Mark, not in the White House. I think he's an adult in the room. I don't think we've had that the last 10 years. I think that he's very technically solid, and I think that, going through the facts and so forth, we're going to be okay. A bad negotiation is worse than no deal. So I don't expect a deal, but I do expect progress.
All right, Paul?
Very much the same. At the end of the day, I too have had an opportunity to spend time with our Prime Minister, and it is about the right deal, not just a quick deal. And so I think he's equipped, and I think he's capable to get us the right thing for the long term.
Jim?
Yeah, I would say we need to make a deal. I know we have to make the right deal. I remember after the election happened and my family would say, Dad, settle down, just settle down. I was like, Prime Minister Trudeau should get on a plane tomorrow, call up Wayne Gretzky, get the son-in-law Dustin, go play a golf game down in Mar-a-Lago and come up with a creative deal, because this is what we have to do tactically long term. It's like one of us with our biggest customer. Right? We have to make a deal. Yes, long term we can diversify, but that's down the road, and so we do need to make a deal with our friends in the U.S.
All right. Well, fingers crossed. Thank you so much, all of you, and thank you.